Welcome back in, everybody, to Wednesday's edition of Birds 365. Just 6 days out from the Philadelphia Eagles reporting to training camp for the start of the 2024 football season. Joined now by Mike Gil from 97.3 ESPN down the shore. Mike, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Good morning, fellas. What's happening?
How are you, Mike? Good to see you. You probably heard a little bit when you're in the green room, so I'm going to ask you: Can you play a little linebacker at this stage?
At this stage, no. I did play linebacker at one stage of my life, but it's been about 30 years, and I wasn't very good at it, so they moved me to safety.
Well, you'll fit right in. You'll fit right in with the Eagles.
I project to like today's linebackers, mostly safety. Yeah, the linebacker spot is. I think it's an ultimate wild card, though. I heard you guys talk about Ben Van Sumeren. I mean,
yeah, I'm talking about
one of these guys that has like just uber athletic ability. He would be like a Mike Mamola back in the day, right? He would test really well, and you'd be like, wow. The question is, how does that translate into fitting into a scheme, and how does that translate into game action? Devin White has all the traits. He's the 5th pick in the draft. You know, he's only 26 years old, too. We did a list yesterday of the top 10 players in Philly, 25 years and younger. That list was sad. It's filled with guys who have never even stepped on the field before. Yeah. And Devin White happens to be 26 years old, so he doesn't qualify. But he's another guy.
Yeah, I see those 20. Now, for the Eagles, most of their really good players are like, just missed the crux.
Well, yeah, like Smith would be Smith and Dickerson and Carter, Jordan Davis would be the ones that are actually on the roster that have played. Hurts will be 26 when the season starts. Yeah. So Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean get on that list basically because there's nobody else in town. Yeah. But the linebacker position with Devin White being 26, Nakobe Dean is 23, by the way. When you see that, and think about it, he's such a young guy, and you wonder like how much more learning there is in there for him. I think one of the things about Dean that was attractive, though, was that he was kind of like a veteran college player, was a smart guy, and that many people thought he would be pretty much game ready once he entered the league. But you don't realize, when he got in the league at 21 years old, he was such a young guy. Where is he now in that development? This position has so many interesting twists and turns, and they're all better than me.
Can Vic Fangio overcome the weakness at this position, Mike Gil? I mean, I don't know why Howie neglects this position, but can it be overcome this year? We all have high expectations. Everybody's talking about how Vic Fangio is going to turn this defense around. I'm not really seeing evidence of a lot of great players that he got in addition to last year, but can he overcome this linebacker position?
Well, Xander, he can overcome it if the guys can play. I mean, they didn't think they had great linebackers, I'm assuming, with TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. I think those guys surprised everybody, right? TJ Edwards became a guy that got a contract that signed in free agency. I don't think the Eagles, when they got him and plugged him into that spot, knew or thought at that time they were getting a guy that was going to be highly sought after. So, yeah, they can overcome it if these guys can reach their potential. Devin White has a ton of potential. Can Vic Fangio kind of, reel him in a little bit and get him to understand it? 26 years old, you can't be a wild man running all over the field using all your athletic talent like maybe you did your first couple of years in the league. Can he kind of reel Ben Van Sumeren to be something more? Can he get more out of Nakobe Dean? Can Nakobe Dean stay healthy? Look, we don't really know if Nakobe can play at this level. He hasn't been healthy enough to show us one way or another. So there's not enough sample size from him to say he is or isn't. And quite frankly, after that, I mean, those are the two guys. It's White and Dean. They're the two guys I imagine they're hoping get most of the snaps. That's their TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. And they're hoping that, look, if these guys can play to their potential, they're better than that duo. I don't think they will be better than that duo, but weren't both of those players? Don't both of those players have a higher pedigree than those two previous
well,
ones?
Sure. Everybody's got a higher pedigree than TJ Edwards, but people got to get over that. I mean, TJ, I was talking about TJ again yesterday. I've talked about him too much. People who watch this show know I'm a big TJ Edwards guy. One of the reasons I am is because I saw him from day one to the day he left and saw that development and growth. And he's not even the same guy physically as the guy who ran a 4.87, which was the reason he wasn't drafted. 4.87 is a freaking disaster, Mike.
Yeah.
Linebacker going into the NFL. Remember, TJ Edwards was second. He was a great college player. He was second in the Butkus voting. In his last.
And by the way, Nakobe Dean and Devin White were both excellent college. These guys are all excellent college players. But you're right. TJ Edwards was not thought to be on their level because he didn't get drafted. Devin White was the 5th pick in the draft.
Yeah. And he didn't get drafted because he ran a 4.87. And Devin got drafted number 5 because he's the freaky 4.4 guy, who also excelled, unlike Ben Van Sumeren, who's the freaky 4.4 guy. He excelled at the college level. He was a tremendous college linebacker at LSU. But at some point, here's my deal. Here's why I have more optimism. And you can tap in. You're a youth baseball coach. Now, you don't get the kids as long. But when you have a sample size of 5 years, I don't care how old they are. That's the guy. That's a big sample size. That guy ain't changing. Now, why I still have some optimism for Nakobe Dean, he's barely played. I don't know what he is.
Right. Nakobe Dean, we just don't have enough resume on at this level. He's been hurt. Now, the few games that he's played, I don't know that you can take anything from them, right? He played 3 games last year. The year before, what did he play in? A handful of snaps.
Yeah,
so he has barely played a quarter. I mean, and I say a quarter, not 12 minutes. I'm talking about 4 games. He barely played a quarter of an NFL season. So Dean has to be the one that really finally finds his footing in this league. And I say that for 2 reasons. Finds his footing that he can stay healthy and becomes the player that many people thought should have been a 1st-round pick. And then when he slid to the 3rd round, it was almost like the Eagles had to finally tap in and say, all right, we'll take a linebacker. But people were almost outraged that he didn't. How did this guy got not picked in the 1st round? Well, he hasn't done anything in 2 years for multiple reasons. He couldn't get on the field the 1st year because he wasn't better than the 2 guys that were here. And last year he got hurt. And that was one of the questions about him coming into the draft was, could he stay healthy? So that's he would have to be a complete wild card entering this season. Can he be better than either of the 2 guys that were his predecessors, White or Edwards? I don't think anybody is excited to, or I think you would be excited if he could, but I don't think anybody's anticipating that. And then Devin White, as you said, 5 years in the league, he kind of is what he is. The one thing I will say about that, John, is if you coach a guy for 5 years, at what point does he need to kind of go and get a different voice or something different?
Well, that's what,
to get
the ironic thing is that's what Todd Bowles said. And remember, Todd Bowles is a great defensive coordinator. If you're talking about top 5 defensive coordinators, and he's a head coach now, but you get my point.
Yeah.
Todd's going to be in the conversation with Vic, with Jim Schwartz, guys like that. So it's not like he got poor coaching in Tampa. And by the way, to that point, when Devin talked to us, he loves Todd Bowles. He loves him. Called him a father figure, still checks in with him, very worried about him. Obviously was a little depressed, disappointed about where he was from a contract standpoint. So he loves the guy, and he couldn't tap into what it was. I just don't. And by the way, I hope I'm wrong. But generally, when you have slow starters, like Brandon Graham was a slow starter. Part of it was an injury, he tore his ACL. Obviously, fans were calling him a bust, mainly because Earl Thomas was picked right after him, Jason Pierre-Paul. And they wanted those guys, and all of a sudden, Brandon takes off. I got a tough time coming up with a guy who takes off in his 6th year. And he's played. It's not like he didn't play, for 3 of those years,
Yeah.
3 of those 5. He was a starter day one, and he got progressively worse throughout his time in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I think his, this is a classic case of draft status making people more excited than maybe they should be.
It's
And
interesting though, because he did get the 5th-year option picked up, which is like if he had so many bad years, like you know what I mean, you can kind of go away from that and not pay him that.
the
big
1 year
money.
was he not first team All Pro 1 year?
He was, but that was earlier in his career. I mean, and then
like 2019.
That was all tied to 9 sacks.
Right.
Yeah, 9 sacks.
Yep.
And that's what and I'm going to kill my brethren and our buddy Rob Motti, knows the boaters for the AP, and Rob, get me a boat because people are making bad decisions. That's a bad decision. He was never an all-pro level player. So, but I get it. It's on the resume. And look, I'm going to pull it up again.
To be fair to Devin, and look, I don't have a lot of excitement or expectations there as well. And a lot of that, look, admittedly, it's funny because the same people were saying that voted him to be an all-pro are now also the people that are saying, he's not that much of a player. But the year they won the Super Bowl, now of small sample size, he was pretty darn good in that run.
He was phenomenal. Well, that Xander will tell you. Yeah. It's one of the greatest anomalies in sports. For 3 games, he was what people thought he was. For 3 games in Tampa Bay's run to the Super Bowl. And people hate when I bring this up, but I'm going to bring it up because you're here, Mike. These are PFF career grades for Devin White. 2019, number 68 of 90 linebackers as a rookie. Not, all right, he's a rookie, he's learning. Number 2020, when I believe he was the all-pro season, 62 of 83. He was worse than he was as a rookie from the overall grade. 2021, 79th of 86. 2022, 74th of 81. 2023 last season, 80 of 82. Now, people say, well, PFF sucks when they're criticizing play. Look, when they're giving Jordan Mailata great grades, everybody loves that. When they're giving AJ Brown great grades, everybody loves that. When they're giving Lane Johnson great grades, my point is, when somebody's playing well, they get it right. When somebody's playing poorly, they get it right. Now, there's a lot of context, scheme, all that kind of stuff. But if you want to boil it down, if they say somebody's playing poorly, they're playing poorly.
Well, I'll go back to Xander's question. Can Vic Fangio overcome some of that? Can he do anything? What evidence in the past can we compare Devin White to in terms of somebody that Vic has worked with that he can tap into what he did with somebody else? I mean, that's a lot of times you say, hey, we talked about it, I think last week, he gets Van Ginkel last year and he saw something in him to say, I'm going to use him like this. And that gets more out of him. Is there a linebacker that he has had in the past that he can use Devin White comparably to?
I'd have to do a deep dive into the history of Vic Fangio.
Well, he had the green dot in the spring. He was calling the defense in the spring, hopefully because N'Kobe wasn't, 100% yet.
I think, though, that's the answer, Xander. No one stands out as a linebacker who played, that played for Vic in the past that you're like, that's the kind of player that he can use Devin White in the same mold.
And I've heard the pass rush part, because the one thing that Devin White can do is go get the quarterback. However, because of his athleticism. However, he's not a better pass rusher than Bryce Huff. He's not a better pass rusher than Josh Sweat. He's just the kind of guy who's going to be able to blitz and catch you off guard. 2 things there. Vic doesn't blitz a lot. And when he does, it's generally going to be a zone drop. So you're taking the better pass rusher and dropping him into coverage for the lesser pass rusher. So he's a very smart guy. I don't think you're going to see that consistently. That's a curveball. Yeah, I don't got a lot of hope, and I hope I'm wrong. And my hope resides in guys like Ben and Jacoby, who we have less of a sample size on, and maybe you can develop those players because they don't have the bad habits. That's where I was going originally when I brought up your coaching. Mike, even at a lower level, you know how hard it is to correct bad habits.
Yeah. It is. And, by the way, I think Vic Fangio worked with Patrick Willis, might be one of the linebackers that he has had in his past. Pretty good linebacker. And I think Vic came here, right, with a reputation of having solid linebacker play. I just don't know what that means. Are we looking for a flashy playmaker? Are we looking for a guy who's a splash play? Are we looking for what the Eagles got in TJ Edwards and Kaiser White? Just two solid linebackers. Like, they weren't flashy. They didn't jump off the page. They didn't look at their numbers and have 15 pass breakups and 2 interceptions and 4 sacks. I mean, they didn't have, years where the numbers jumped out. They just did, Bill Belichick. They just did their job. They were just solid. They did every week. The year before, I remember you would have, oh my God, what was his name? The safety from Nebraska, 47.
Nate Gary,
47, I would call him, because I said the other team would look on the game tape and say, find 47 and throw the ball in that area. He sucked. He was horrible.
Which is ironic because he was a safety, and you would
Exactly.
think he'd be better in coverage.
He was so bad in pass coverage as a linebacker, though. But, the Eagles linebackers that year, they didn't do anything that hurt the team. Did they do anything that stood out? Were they the reason why the defense was very good? Probably not. It just was that they didn't make mistakes. They were sound in the scheme. Is that too much to ask? Is just be sound in the scheme. Don't, try to do too much. Just kind of get your job done. I don't know. Devin White doesn't profile as that kind of player in my eyes. Jacoby Dean might. He might be the smart guy.
Well, yeah.
That
he's got the high football IQ. If you're talking about football IQ, you're talking Jacoby and Trotter. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. that's his reputation as well. High football IQ, but I think he's more about 2025 and 2026 as a developmental player. For this season, they wanted to be Jacoby Dean and Devin White. I can't even tell you today who's going to be the middle linebacker and who's going to be the weak side linebacker. I assume they wanted to be Jacoby to be the green dot. But I don't know that for a fact. And much of the uncertainty, and I joked about it, when we asked Vic about the linebackers, he had to go into his pocket and get his roster out and say, all right, what do we got here? And I think in a lot of ways, Mike, that's their plan. That's how he's playing. Vic will figure it out at linebacker. That's his plan. And I don't know if that's fair to Vic Fangio.
Right. Yeah, that's what you do. You're the GM. You get a player and you say to the position coach or the coach, here you go. Make this guy a linebacker. Make him a good linebacker. Work with him every day. Get him up to speed. A lot of things that I wonder. You have Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and the guys up front, taking up the space with athletic linebackers behind him. You're going to see a guy like Devin White make 140 tackles in this type of defense. Is that what they want from? What do they want from their linebackers in this defense? I think that's another question that needs to be asked. And what do they want? And can these guys provide that? Are we asking them to do something they can't do? Or do we just want you to, hey, you got 2 space eaters up in front of you. We want to go up and tackle. I don't know. What role do the linebackers have in Vic's defense?
Yeah, competency. I think that's all they want. Competency. I think that's the goal. I don't think they care. That's for outside the building. Like, people want sacks and tackles. They don't give a shit about that, but they just want to stop people on third down, get off the field. They want competency at linebacker. And to me, it's a little bit unfair. And to boil it back to Todd Bowles, like I said, look, it's very unlikely Vic Fangio is going to have the same relationship with Devin White as Todd did. Again, he looks at him as a father figure. He looks at him, he loves the guy. So I don't think there's going to be any untapped, oh, he's going to figure out, Devin White's mentality more than Todd. That's my biggest concern of all. Like, if Todd Bowles can't tap into it, people are putting way too much on Vic Fangio.
Yeah.
And I think Vic's great. But I mean, so is Todd Bowles.
It's
let's
the
be honest.
microcosm, John, of the fan relationship with the coach in all sports. The coach sucks. You got to get a new coach. And then the new coach comes in and he sucks too. At what point do the fans realize it's not the coach's fault 85 to 90% of the time? In football, there are, I think, more coaching things that you can, put blame on the coach because they do call every single play. But as we talk about that, if the play is executed right and it works, it's a great call. If it doesn't, yada, yada. But the fans always love to blame the coach. And therefore, they feel like when there's a coach that has a higher pedigree, that everything will be fixed and everything will be changed. It's like when the then Redskins sucked for all those years. They brought back Joe Gibbs. Well, we got Joe Gibbs. He was a great coach. He won Super Bowls. Well, guess what? He wasn't the same coach as he was back then because the players weren't as good. It's like you can't just always fix the coach and that fix everything. That being said, I do think that will help in the Eagles' situation of the problems they had a year ago to what they have now.
Yeah, I agree with that. Speaking, since you brought that up, let's go to the offensive side of the football. Too much talking about the linebacker position.
I know. I'm looking up at my TV, and the Eagles' offense is on my screen for the last 15 minutes.
All right. Well, we'll start. I want to talk about. Have you been watching Hard Knocks? We'll talk about the Hard Knocks.
I saw the first episode. I have not found the second. I don't have Max, so I've been seeing the clips. Was last night the third episode?
Yeah.
So I have not seen 2 and 3, but I have seen
HBO okey doked everybody. Everybody ran with, the Giants offered. Say no, they didn't. If people watch the show, it was a hypothetical. If we offer him blah blah blah, will he come back? And the answer was essentially no. So the Giants kind of tapped out. But that's what happened with Saquon Barkley.
So what I've seen is that John Mara is not sleeping a whole heck.
Oh my God, John Mara is a disaster. But boy, if Jody was here, he would kill me because he loves John Mara. He's a New York guy, and everybody loves John Mara. But boy, he's a fan, Mike. He's like, we got to keep Eli. We got to keep Saquon. Win a damn game. Move on. Build a different way.
His comment is personifies it. If you're the GM of the team and you have the owner saying, well, he's by far the most popular guy we have, by far the most popular guy. Who cares who's most popular? I mean,
but you guys and I both know that matters, especially when you're an owner. This is the NFL.
I'll tell you where it matters, Xander, when your team sucks.
Exactly. Exactly.
When you know your team sucks and you need something to give the fans excitement about, when you know your team will not be successful, then yes, having a uberly popular player, you need some reason to have. And I think, they understand they stink.
Was interesting.
Well, Joe does. I don't think John does. John Mara.
Well, John, what did you think about this? Because the other thing that was interesting to me in that clip was Joe Schoen says to the owner, I think the Eagles are out. That was clearly bad information that he was given. He said, I got a call.
I think he was trying to talk because it seemed like the biggest goal of John Mara was to get Saquon back. Yes, but if they weren't going to get him back, to keep him out of the division, hopefully Chicago. You
could hear in Joe Schoen was just crying and dying to get the information from the agent of, please don't tell me it was in the division. And you could almost, without him saying, please don't tell me it's Philadelphia. It was like, any other team, please tell me who's the agent.
But that from Joe's standpoint, Joe Schoen's standpoint, that was about acquiescing to the owner. You get to see some of the inner workings of what these GMs have to deal with.
It is.
And again, this has to do with the advantage the Eagles have with Jeffrey Lurie. He's a very good owner. as opposed to a very bad owner, which you're seeing live in practice. So Jane's worried when Joe Shane is worried about talking to Ed Berry, Saquon Barkley's agent. He's worried about John Mara's reaction. He doesn't give a shit. He's probably happy, to be honest. Now he's got a long way to go to get where the Eagles are. They haven't been competitive, but he's been saying we've been wasting our time trying to build around a running back. Now the Eagles aren't doing that, but I'm just saying. And at the end, he said we're going to be fine because he didn't want the player.
Right. Shane. So in retro, like if you're pulling the lens out here and looking in, Shane looks bad because if you're perceiving that the owner's right, he's saying the owner is an idiot, basically. He is trying to rewire the owner's brain to say, we don't need to be spending your money on a running back here if we want to win. You brought me here from Buffalo. We had no running back in Buffalo. We were going with a bunch of different guys. Let me do my thing and get out of here. But you can't say that to the owner of the team.
And this is the reason why the Eagles want no part of these types of shows. Could you imagine?
I can't imagine anybody wants any parts of these shows. Come on.
Yeah, anybody, but the Eagles have a good organization, but they have some very real conversations when it comes to players that would upset fans. I'll just say that. Some very real and honest conversations about player evaluation that would upset fans. And they don't want that in the public. They do not want that in the public. I asked a bunch of guys, as an example, Howie said they drafted 5 Red Star players this year up on the podium. And, you know, Sidney Brown was a Red Star player. Red Star player, for people that don't know, it's not blue chip. It's somebody that fits the Eagles culture. They're good on the field. They're good off the field. They're good. I asked some people I know in the organization, you know, basically off the record, and I could say because they didn't answer, they didn't want to answer. And why do they don't want to answer? Because they don't want it getting out who isn't a Red Star player and who they have some concerns about. So, you know, when it's one guy, you can say, oh, Sidney Brown's a Red Star player, as Howie did eventually. He mentioned they drafted 5 Red Star. Now, you can guess a bunch of them because Will Shipley's the most Red Star players in history, but you can guess a bunch of them. They don't want it out there. They don't want these conversations out in any kind of public or seeping out in public. Jalen Hurts, there are some difficult conversations they've had over the years with Jalen Hurts. They don't want that out there. They don't want it out there. Everybody blames the media, Mike, when we tell them, oh, the Eagles were trying to, you know, change Deshaun Watson's mind back in the day, or they wanted Russell Wilson back in the day. They don't want to hear that. And you could blame it on the evil media.
I can't imagine any team wants to be on this show. But after seeing the show for the first season, I can imagine fans, they like this more than the training camp one. They like this way more than the in-season one. This is what every fan, you know, the fans, we've gotten to a weird culture where the off-season building of a team is almost more enjoyable than the season itself for some. You know, it's the Sixers process. We love watching the tear down and the build back up. Why? Because we all feel that we could do that job. We've done it playing John Madden football our whole lives. We draft a franchise and we cut guys and we, you know, build a salary cap and we make trades. We all feel that we could do that job. So the GM portion of the job is way more appealing to fans because it's something they can relate to more so than playing the game.
Yeah,
none of us can play. We know we can't play.
Or coaching. Yeah, because coaching's
and that's why the coach gets blamed a lot. There are a lot of people out there that feel that they could coach. But
to your point about popular players, I wanted to flesh that out as well. And you're right about when you're bad, you need to focus on a popular player. You need to pump that up. You need to get somebody in the building, all that kind of stuff. There's a business aspect to it. Well, you know what, if you win, you got a shitload of popular players. That's where it would frustrate me to no end if I'm Joe Shane working for John Mara. I'm like, dude, if we win games, we'll have 10 Saquon Barkleys. Everybody will love everybody if they win games.
Well, yes and no. I see what your point is. If you win, everybody's happy and they don't care who you're winning with. But what is your ceiling of winning? Are you 9-8 like they were?
No,
or
I
whatever
mean win.
Yeah.
Win.
Sure. Absolutely. Like if you are a Super Bowl level team. And I think that John Mara realizes that they're not there, right? He's saying we're not a 13-4 team. And therefore, I need something to sell to my fan base. I need somebody's jersey to be bought. Now they don't have that. Now, Joe Shane might say, hey, this year we might win 7 games, which could turn into 10 games. He's looking at the long view of this. The problem in today's sports society is you don't get the long view. And if John Mara's sitting there watching Showtime last night, he's probably saying, I got to get rid of this guy. He's looking at the long game, and I want to win in the short term because how old am I? I don't have a long game to enjoy this ownership right now. So it's a weird dynamic where generally you have the young GM who's looking long term and a guy who's at the end of the road owning the team, making the the purse strings.
The frustrating, and I'm going to kill John Mara here. The frustrating part with John Mara, if I'm a Giants fan or somebody involved, I mean, they did this with Eli Manning when Eli was just awful, and they kept bringing him back and bringing him back and bringing him back, and they wouldn't make the tough decision. And this is why they've been bad for a decade plus with one.
It's hard. A lot of
anomaly
teams
of the
do it,
season.
though. A lot of teams do it. You see it in every sport. You hold on to the championship core too long, and then it just, it becomes quickly decrepit. We've seen it in Philly a lot. The 93 team went to a World Series. They brought some of those guys back. They got old really fast, and then they were gone. The 08 Phillies team, they were good for 09, 10, and 11, but they kept hanging on, 12, 13, and those guys just couldn't hold up anymore. And it led to 10 miserable baseball seasons because you tried to hold on to Utley and Rollins and Howard for way too long.
Yeah, it is difficult. I'm not saying it's not difficult, but
the Eagles, to some extent, did it after they won that Super Bowl in 17. They gave Alshon Jeffrey the extension. They kept some guys probably a little, and they admitted it. They said, hey, we thought we had the window and we went after it.
Eli, I can buy that explanation. Maybe it's the right word. I don't want to use excuse, but because they had success with Eli Manning. They won 2 Super Bowls. They were 25, 48, and 1 with Saquon Barkley. Now, there's a lot of context, a lot of poor supporting cast. To me, this is one of the easiest decisions. And by the way, this has nothing to do for the Eagles. Saquon Barkley makes some sense. We'll see if it works out. For the New York Giants, it makes no sense. They tried to build a foundation.
It also made no sense when they drafted him with the number 2 pick.
Yes.
Yeah, it did. Made zero sense.
From day one, it made no sense. And this moron, John Maris, he's gonna not sleep. Why? So so over the next number of seasons, you lose 70% of your games. I mean, what are we doing here? Eagles fans should rejoice every morning that Jeffrey Lurie is their owner.
Hey, they've won as many playoff games with Saquon as the Cowboys have in about 20 years.
One. And that was the anomaly season. And,
but they for beat the Eagles, that Vikings team.
And a really bad defensive one, by the way, with that Donatel. But for the Eagles, it makes some sense because it's a luxury. It's not a foundational piece. And that's the difference.
He is probably the third offensive option on the team. Yeah, it's like a Paul Heyman ECW edition. You're accentuating his positives here. I'm not bringing him in to be a superstar. I'm bringing him in to accentuate the positives of our offense. I've already got Brown and Smith and this offensive line and Goddard. They've already been here. The foundation of what they do is here. We're just upgrading a position that's been, by the way, Miles Sanders scored 11 touchdowns and had over 1,000 yards for you 2 years ago. Now, no one even knows what he's doing. DeAndre Swift had 1,000 yards rushing here last year. You're just bringing in a more talented player than the two that already excelled in this offense and just hoping for more. Because when teams game plan for the Eagles before, they're not game planning for Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift. They're afterthoughts. Now you can't make Saquon Barkley an afterthought. He has to be a part of your thought tree. I think putting together a game plan.
I think people were a little bit worried about Miles as a runner. A little bit. So I don't think it's going to be that different, but we'll see in the passing game. That's where he has to set himself apart, not only as a receiver, but as a pass protector. He's a better pass protector. I thought it was ironic Chicago was the other team. They obviously signed DeAndre Swift, but they were haggling. Is it going to be Saquon, DeAndre? The Eagles wanted DeAndre back if they weren't going to get Saquon. So it was really the Bears and the Eagles more than the Giants and the Eagles. And the Bears ended up getting DeAndre. So we'll see how that works out for them. Mike Gill Show, 97.3 ESPN, locally ESPN South Jersey. We got a lot of international listeners, so I'm not sure if the guys from where were they from, Sandra? Australia,
Germany, Australia, and a Canada this morning. All checking in the first couple.
But they can listen on the app. So listen to Mike. 97.3 ESPN.
3 or 4 days. I'm off the next 3 or 4 days. I did this special for you guys.
I appreciate that. You're gearing up for training camp, but still listen to the guys. I assume Josh Henning is going to fill in for
Nikki
you.
Earnshaw and Josh are in for me.
And Mike will be back for the start of camp next week.
Yep.
Enjoy the season, buddy. Appreciate it.
Mike, thanks for joining us, man.
All right, boys. See you.
Thanks.
There's Mike Gil joining us on Birds 365. Does a great job on 97.3 ESPN, as Johnny Mack just pointed out. So good stuff there for Mike Gil. A lot of linebacker talk today, which is all good. John, before we get to a break, I do want to address one super chat we got when you had Mike up. It's regarding Devin White. I was going to bring it up, but we already flowed into a different part of the conversation. James says, I get PFF grades on White and agree with J-Mac generally, but what about voted NFL top 100 2 times in a row, which is voted by players?
No, that's even more important. I have been in that locker room.
Yeah,
when the Eagles, and I've told this story many times, every year there's a day the NFL people come in and do the top 100 list in the locker room. And I'm lucky enough to be there they spend about 10 seconds thinking about that, if that. And they generally vote for their teammates. The NFL top 100 list is a waste of time. It is not meaningful in any way. They vote on, I will say this, and I say this all the time, when it comes to players and their peers, they value the guys who are really, really athletic and freakish, and that's what Devin is. So people look at him and they say, wow, he's special from an athleticism standpoint. But, like AJ. AJ is very, very honest when it comes to corners. I love talking to him about corners and about opposing corners. And I tell you all the time, one of the reasons I'm so high on Kaylee Ringo is because AJ is so high on Kaylee Ringo. He does not respect zone corners. He does not respect corners that cannot match him physically. There's a bunch of good zone corners that are better than man-to-man corners. But like he's enamored with the guys who can at least somewhat keep up with him from an athleticism standpoint. Guys I've covered, like Randy Moss and Adrian Peterson. Now, they're great players, but they're also freakish athletes. So when you get the Aaron Donalds of the world, Brandon Brooks used to talk about Aaron Donald with awe. They respect freakish athleticism. And that's why Devin was on that list. He did not deserve to be on that list.
Good response there from John McMullen. John, it's interesting. We were talking about Eli Manning. I'm just going into the chat, reading some of the comments that we got from, regarding that. I'm obviously an Eagles fan. I don't like the New York Giants, but I think Eli Manning gets way too much hate. I mean, Eli Manning has more Super Bowl rings than the entire Eagles franchise, as Barbara Carroll points out. Look, I know that he was the win record's 500 and all that, but we're playing for Super Bowls. Eli Manning won 2 of them against the greatest coach-quarterback combination in the history of the NFL. I think he deserves a little